we haven't really learned anymore to talk to one another about things we believe, but we can only shout to one another.
Yeah.
And that I would say that's the bigger problem here. I'm not coming here on this podcast in order to have my say and then you'll believe me, but the point of a conversation is to want to understand one another first, and only then can we really discuss things with each other. If I believe in God, God loves me either way, if I'm wrong or right. I might be very wrong about certain things. I might be wrong about God. But what's most important is that I am humble towards the truth, that I allow myself to begin to surrender to whatever might be true. What faith really is a relationship. And you have a relationship with the person, and you know something about the person, but only what they give to you. So the only thing I know about you is what you show me or tell me. And at a certain point in the relationship, I might make the decision of trusting you. And the same goes with God. I certainly think it's funny that people distrust an organization such as the Catholic Church, thinking it's controlled by secret societies or otherwise malevolent powers, but then trust a lone person saying, just follow me and I will show you how things really are, such as in the Church of Scientology.
Welcome to Common Underground Podcast. I'm your host, Jasper Owenhaas, and today I'm joined by Daniel. He's the guest star tonight. Daniël Bos is his full name. And we met in Bolsward. We used to work in the same restaurant, and just stood at the same restaurant as Cheered, who isn't here today because of a storm in Jamaica. Hope he's doing good, but he doesn't have any power. So unfortunately, he isn't here, but... Daniel, I know that you study theology in Groningen, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
All right, and I also like to thank you for taking your time to being on this podcast and taking the courage to having these conversations, because I think the conversation that we're gonna have is very important, and I think it's also very relevant to what you're doing with theology. So maybe you can share a little bit about how you got involved in studying theology, how you became interested, and tell me a little bit a reason why you became. I should also mention that you're a Catholic, Catholic theology. You know a lot more than I do, but about this. Tell me something. Like how did you get introduced into becoming a theologist and becoming a Christian?
Yes, well, thank you, Jasper, first of all, for having me in the first place. It's a wonderful opportunity, and like you said, it's important for me as a theologian to get out there, as you can call it. What do I do, and who am I? Yes, as you said, I'm a Roman Catholic since August 30th, and I've been studying theology for about 2 years now. This is my second year in the university. And I do that as a Roman Catholic, but I do that partly in the public University of Groningen. And then another part in the Protestant Theological University. So those universities work together. And my plan is to become a theologian. What kind of theologian is yet to be revealed to me. But after finishing my bachelor in Groningen, I would like to go somewhere to study Catholic theology. And then, just like you, go out into the world and, in my case, for a Catholic, in any case, proclaim the gospel.
So this journey you're gonna make is more like a pilgrimage to share your journey and and what you want to teach to people. Is that correct?
Well, in a certain sense, well, when people hear the word evangelicism or proclaiming the gospel, for example, if they hear that term, they often think of very aggressive. I want to convince you of this truth, and partly that's true. You have people and you have ways of doing that, but I see all conversations about truth, about communicating with each other. I see that as proclaiming the gospel because it proclaims truth. And so even if we are not going to talk about the most deep Christian theology, if we're just going to talk about what we want to talk about in front of an audience, like you said on your podcast, common underground, I see that as a form of like you said, pilgrimage. So yeah, you could say so.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. So now we know a little bit about your interest and what you find important and your background. And I would like to introduce people what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about something that we both find very important, but we both have completely different as far as we gather from our previous conversations. And of course, we both changed some little bit about this, and we'll discuss this, but the subject will be conspiracy theories and how we have all these tribes nowadays, and people might be familiar with the word postmodernism. So that is something that a lot of people share this view of postmodernism. I did some previous research before I started this podcast, but I would love to hear what your thoughts are on these because why I picked, or why you picked. I'm sorry, you picked it. This subject is because well, maybe you can better say it for itself. But why I find it important is because. Or why I would consider myself a conspiracy. I'm sorry, I would say this, I need to be more precise in my words. But why I would say that I'm a conspiracy theorist is, or I wouldn't regard myself necessarily a conspiracy theorist, but I share a lot of views that a lot of conspiracy theorists have. But one thing I would not, that's the same thing that you talked about, like, okay, I want to convince you about this gospel. Is that I will call someone like a sheeple, or would talk down on someone that doesn't share my view. And this is also what my podcast is all about. And I hope this will be an example of a conversation that people could be having, even though they have different views, that they can still be in a relaxed state where they can openly discuss all these matters about like things that are very relevant, like conspiracy view, because a lot of people, and I think it's one of the most fast growing groups in our society nowadays. So there's a lot of momentum in people wanna or are sharing this view, like, and we can talk a little bit what this view includes and what it does not. But overall, that there is a conspiracy within society, within the structure of way our society functions, and especially like the government and banks, and I know, and secret societies. You cannot talk about conspiracy without secret societies. So a lot of people have that view of there is a conspiracy, but some people kind of point their finger on it, like what it exactly is. But would you ignore, or no, sorry, wouldn't you agree that there is a conspiracy on some level into our society, or what is your view on this?
So what would you mean by there's a conspiracy? So do you mean like people have conspiracy theories, or just that those conspiracy theories are true?
Well, like the definition of conspiracy is that people work together against your interests. So having the conspiracy view, I would say that you believe that there is a structure functioning in our society that is not working within our own interests, and is working against us. And you could include the earth and nature in this as well. But especially like it doesn't serve the needs that we really have. And so it works against us. And there is, the society has two sides. It can be positive, which like it provides order. But then there's the negative side, which is like tyrannical. And I think a lot of people, I can only speak for myself. So a lot of people have different views on what they consider like being conspiracy theorists, or what theories are true and what are not. There are a lot divided within that. But I think what they all share is that there is a conspiracy within the structure, and that is working against their interests. So that's the most simple definition or explanation I can give. Is that a suitable answer?
Yeah, sure. A few things that I think about while you were explaining it is that I wouldn't necessarily use the word conspiracy. I guess, coming from a Catholic background, or at least being part of the Catholic Church, there are numerous conspiracy theories about our church. I think in our view, and in my view as personal view as well, I wouldn't necessarily use the word conspiracy, but I would believe that everyone, almost everyone anyways, just has their own agendas, has their own goals, has their own needs, has their own wants, and that these take different shape, and that all of these kind of play in the same world, and sometimes in an organized manner. Sure. So I believe the word lobby I would probably use. Or a party. So in the USA, for example, we just had the election, so it's fresh in my head. You have a Democratic Party who has its goals, and you have the Republican Party who has its goals and needs. And so I would say that no, I wouldn't think that there's a conspiracy consciously working to undermine the world or order. I do think that there's a lot of evil in the world, certainly. But I think this is, I think I would just call that human. And making the distinction between, having a conspiracy, making the distinction between order or chaos, naturally means that there's also a mode of order. So a way things naturally are how they are supposed to be. And yes, I do believe that's certainly the case. There's certainly the case that you can't believe that the world is meant to be in a certain way, but that now it's a mixed bag at its best. But I wouldn't say I believe in a big conspiracy. I just believe that there's just a lot of chaos and interplay between people's own wants.
Yeah, okay. Well, the thing about conspiracy theories overall is that there needs to be done a lot of research on what conspiracies they exactly are. Like there are some things you can pinpoint down, like the Gulf of Tonkin, or certain provable, like very solid provable experiences that really happened, and there was a involvement in people working together to create this situation where they benefit the most from it, and they use this situation for their own gain. So you wouldn't consider that as being a conspiracy as well?
No, I think, and this goes back to why we wanted to talk about this. I think conspiracy, definitely with the last few weeks has gained some traction, the term, and popularity. And I think mostly that's just an interesting social phenomenon, because it shows that people, want to understand something which is inherently complicated. That isn't bad, I wouldn't say, and I can certainly understand and have sympathy for the efforts in order to unravel certain mysteries of the world, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't call myself a conspiracy theorist, and I wouldn't believe that there's a big conspiracy in the world. But I do believe that people make conspiracy theories and that they believe in them, and that has influence. And it's certainly interesting that it has gained a lot of traction now in this time. And so and for this podcast, it's very interesting to talk about our different views upon it.
Yeah, certainly. Because there's some things like if you say that people believe that, like there certainly involves a lot of beliefs. I think that there's a lot of conspiracy theories, like flat Earth is a good example. I might trigger some people with this, but I don't believe in flat Earth. But within like the conspiracy movement, there's a lot of people that do believe that the Earth is flat, and they use this view and to convince someone like the Earth is flat, you have to accept this fact. But I will always say, like, I don't see the relevancy really. Like, if the world would be flat, we're still like in this society, we still have to participate and get involved with the things we're already involved in. So for me, it's for me, besides like what is important to really discuss, besides all the things that should be discussed. And that's I'm hoping what we will discuss on this podcast as well, in context to just people having different views and how they still can get along. Because I think like we both, there's a lot of things that you said, like, oh man, I could get triggered. Like this guy says that I believe all these things and that there's nothing true with it, what I believe. And you're not stating that, of course, but someone could be like that and like, you're just a sheeple, man. And because of that, they get blocked, and then we stop this sense of dialogue. And that's, I think, is something that we need to continue growing. Even though I like the things you said, I don't agree with that necessarily, but still it's important to talk about.
No, you make some good points, notably the point of relevancy, because that's why I would draw the line as well. If the Earth was flat, like you, I don't believe in it, but for example, other conspiracy theories, even if Queen Elizabeth II is an immortal lizard, for example, what would that change about my mentality about caring for the poor? What would that change about my relationship with the people next to me? And so I would make that distinction that in traditional spirituality, traditional in the sense that the Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, there's a point to be made that there's an intellectual side of things, and there's a spiritual side of things. So, for example, we believe in the Trinity, that God is Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. There's a side of which, how could that be true? And we would want to know how that would be possible. And on the other side, there's the point of relevancy. So how would that view of viewing God as three persons, how would that change my behavior? And like you said, what might be even more important is the fact that people believe in conspiracy theories or believe in anything, for example. So you already said some people would call you a sheep, or they might call me a sheep, or I might call you a sheep. So certainly in the last few decades, it has grown. We haven't really learned anymore to talk to one another about things we believe, but we can only shout to one another. And that I would say that's the bigger problem here.
What could be a possible solution, or what are some things that you get out of this? Like how could people move on? What would be a right way to approach it?
Well, first we could think about how we got here in the first place. And I think what we're missing today is shared values. That first of all. So it gets harder and harder to find people in the modern age that really agree with each other on fundamental issues. And yes, I am talking about morals or religious morals, for example. So a few decades ago, I think a lot more people would have been Christian, and even if most of them wouldn't be practicing Christians, it would still create a very level playing ground of people talking to one another and understanding one another more clearly as we would now. Because if I say, for example, I believe that no, I wouldn't want to go for the social issues, but for example, if I say to you that I believe in an absolute truth, that truth can be known, and you might disagree with that, just let's say, well, if we disagree with that on that fundamental thing, well, that's already a major difference between us.
Yeah.
Whereas a few decades ago, that wouldn't be the case. And I think to go back to my studies, the point of studying theology, there's a lot of God and there's a lot of spirituality involved, but I think the main question theologians ask is, how do people make sense of their lives? And because spirituality and because God plays such a big role in that, we study that a lot. But in the last few decades, conspiracy theories have come up and play a significant role in people's lives. And that's why it's important to communicate with each other about these issues.
Yeah, I think like one more issue is that people, they overall don't have a lot of time on their hands, so they are busy caring for their family, working to provide, and all these things that society puts on us. So there's not a lot of people that did a lot of research on like conspiracy theories, for example, or asking questions like you're putting forward, like, okay, where do we came from? Some people regard this more as a luxury, of which I don't agree with, but that creates another split, that you have these conversations with people, but a lot of them, they assume a lot of different things that they got from the media, or they heard from someone or whatever, or they did a little bit of research, but they already think that they know everything. So that's the thing, like we want to talk about things that are important, like some things you're touching upon includes psychology, for example. But a lot of people, they don't know a lot of things about psychology, but psychology talks about yourself, how your brain and how your psyche functions. So I would consider it something that people should be familiar with, but there's also these rules in society where, like a guy that picks up trash all day, he's not supposed to know all these things. He just needs to pick up his trash, and that's all he needs to know. Like, why would he be a philosopher? So I think we need like a philosophy where you don't need to do a lot of research, but we have more engaging conversations, more meaningful conversations, where people can share openly what they've learned, and if they did any research or they did have some experience, that they can talk about it openly without being called a sheeple or the undead, or there's so many different words that they say to or even the name callings. Like, you can put it the other way, like people say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Like I pick up some subject that I think, okay, they talk about that there's a conspiracy theory, but then people call me a conspiracy theorist and they don't look at me anymore. But there are some things that you could get out of the things that I'm saying, even though some things might not be true. Just making the discernment, that's crucial.
Yeah. I would say, how do we get out of the situation where we cannot talk to each other? Because as you mentioned, people people are drifting further and further away from each other, and we are creating these bubbles, even consciously or subconsciously. I think of course, there's almost no discussing this. The media has a large role in this. So if I'm a right-leaning person, I would buy more right-leaning newspapers or watch more right-leaning videos on YouTube, which create a vicious circle where more of that stuff would be recommended to me. We're losing touch of the other side, and what I try to do personally in my life, and certainly how that's the reason why we're such good friends, is because we are so different. I think you have to make a good effort to put yourself out there, to get out of your comfort zone, and to find people that think differently than you.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important part.
And through that, you can like challenge your own ideas, like you mentioned before we did podcast. Like why this is so important is that we need to challenge our own and our views, because who says that we know everything? Like that, I think the starting point should be we don't know anything. Let's just figure it out together. And if we haven't figured it all out, it's all okay. Because we always learn a little bit,
And always with the mentality that I'm not coming here on this podcast in order to have my say and then you'll believe me, but the point of a conversation is to want to understand one another first, and only then can we really discuss things with each other, and in the hope that we might be able to solve something. But I think the most important thing is to look for one another, and to try to understand one another first before you make it an effort to tell something.
Yeah. So some people you probably have experiences with this, like being a Catholic and saying that you believe in God. That triggers some people as well, and they'll put you into certain category like, oh, he's a Christian and I won't look at him anymore. But could you share, because I find it a very interesting story how you got involved in becoming a Christian, because like a lot of people that are Christian, they are born into that way of, like I was born a Reformed Christian, but one reason why I wouldn't consider myself a Christian anymore has to do with the experiences that I had there, and also the view that they pushed upon me. And I think, like personally, that spirituality can be approached in a personal way. It's a relationship with what you call God and what I would call just the universe, but it has many names. And eventually there's no name, but at least something more than that we can see with our eyes. And this, for me, doesn't require becoming a Christian. But tell us, tell the viewers a little bit about your story, why you became a Christian, and why didn't you, just like me, research a lot on the internet and became like what I consider myself a spiritual person, but why didn't you choose this path?
Well, because I did. I mean, I did a lot of research on the internet.
Yeah,
and
okay. I mean more like the being the Christian, like the Catholic.
Sure. Well, I grew up in an atheist household. There wasn't really a view pushed upon me, really, but it was mostly atheist. And only after the age of 12 or something like that, I began to think for myself. And the big questions come up. What do you believe in? Do you believe in God? What political leaning do you have? And I would say I never considered myself an active atheist. But if I compare myself now to what I believed earlier, then I wouldn't consider myself a theist either. And I think in the matter of this conversation we're having right now, I went to church. I went to the first church I knew just out of curiosity. I just wanted to know, how did it look there? What are they doing? Why are they doing it?
Mm.
Because I certainly had an image of church in my head. I just wanted to see if it rang a bell. And because Catholics and Christians are increasingly becoming a minority, that influenced the way I interacted with them and how they interacted with me. So Catholics are a very big minority in the north of the Netherlands here, other than in the south, and that made sure that every question was answered pretty skillfully, aware of what I probably thought. That would probably be the key word there. That the Catholicism I met in when I was when I was first going to church was a Catholicism that was very aware of itself, aware of what it believed, and that's one major plus for finding things out yourself, because because if I grew up in the South, for example, or I grew up in a Catholic family or a Christian family like you, that would mean that I would have a very different relationship with the church and with their beliefs. But so kind of like you, because I didn't have any experiences, I had to force myself to study and to think and to roll it over, and that allowed me to approach it with a very independent and aware look. And eventually, eventually you accept, you think, yes, this is what I believe. So again, more kind of like more like your story than you might think.
Yeah. Well, I think like one similarity that we share is the curiosity, because that's what you mentioned, and that really like that is something that's very important, and that makes me distinct from a lot of people. Is that I would consider myself as being a very curious person. Of course, I can always grow and always be more curious. It's always not there yet, but still, like this attitude of wanting to learn and having this right relationship with knowledge, like becoming more knowledgeable about things, about the world. You want to learn about the world, about people, about many different things. And for you, this is then also the church. And for me, that is like very interesting, because I chose why I would say that I would choose a different path is because I wouldn't consider myself as being a Christian. But there is still a lot of similarities, and we also talked before we did podcast about what is important is to find people that are like-minded. And so, like, would you consider yourself? No, I don't know if that's a good question. Would you consider yourself as being like-minded? But it's more better to say, like, how important is it to have like-minded people, because of what we're discussing with the bubble effect. Like if I only, like here, for example, I'm right now in an off-the-grid place where people consider themselves as spiritual, they know about conspiracy theories, so people share a lot of different similar views, but we have we could have gone into a lot of particulars on conspiracy theories, or we can still, but what we don't agree with. So that's why I'm saying like our path is a little bit different in that way. But of course, we share a lot of similarities in our honesty to find more about the world and the spiritual aspect as well.
Yeah, that's a very good question, because it is important to find a balance between when do I become indoctrinated, when do I pull myself too far back into a bubble, but the opposite is also possible, that you put yourself too much out there without any guidance, in which case your beliefs, whatever you believe in, is very weak, and you run the risk of being manipulated into believing something else, which might or might not be for the better. So yeah, it is an important question, especially for, and this is why for many people it's quite daunting to put themselves out there, because they do not want to risk losing what they already believe in, what they already find comfort in. Mm-hmm. And that's certainly something we have to be sympathetic to. I would say that there's a certain level of critical thinking necessary. Yeah. You cannot, and unfortunately, you cannot expect this of everyone. So everyone has their own intellectual level, I could say, mm-hmm. To how much they would run the risk of being manipulated into something. Because, for example, I'm pretty comfortable in my Catholicism at the moment, and I study theology, so I know a thing or two. But if I talk to the most professional and the most skillful Muslim theologian, for example, if I give him enough conversations with me, and I might convert. That's totally possible. But would that be very wise for me? No. So it is a very good question. How do you balance something like that? I can certainly say for me. I can certainly say for me, when I had conversations with my pastor in the beginning, when I was still asking the most basic of questions about the Christian faith, I didn't understand everything he said, and I certainly didn't agree with everything he said. But thinking about what he was telling me, I could sense a certain depth in his answer. So I could, I might not understand him, but I did think, well, there's something behind what he's telling me. So let me see what is behind it. Let me try to understand that first, and then make a decision. Mm-hmm. And that is one way of trying to find that balance.
Yeah, because something that I've put into blame to our educational system, we at first we get exposed to different people. Maybe it depends on what type of school you were to. Like if you're a multicultural school, you get introduced to a lot of different cultures. But for me, like for example, I went very strict school where you had this reformic view, and they didn't really teach me how to think for myself and how to learn from certain people, not just entirely believe based upon their words. Like if you have a teacher in front of the class, he's the authority figure, and authority is not mm-hmm. necessarily something negative, but he has a certain authority. So we don't really get to put forward these questions like, okay, I don't agree with this, I don't agree with that, I agree with this, but that you can make this discernment. And I think education has a responsibility, and I am personally a teacher assistant, so I know I have some experience with this. Mm-hmm. But I think it's very important that we learn that we can talk with people, but not just have like nice conversations that we were like, oh yeah, nice conversation, but also that we learn the right things from it. And that can mean different things from different people.
Yeah, good point. And another difficult point would be that, what you said in the beginning, you begin not knowing anything, or at least pretending that you do not know everything, and build from there. Well, that's a very difficult thing when encountering something new, isn't it? Because the law of humility, even the most amateur of philosophers can quote Socrates on this. A wise man knows that he knows nothing. Well, if that is true, and I do have to consider myself as unknowing, well, then how can I have any principles that allow me to stay in my position without becoming too manipulated by other people.
Yeah.
And like you said, one of the ways of handling this is to teach children from a young age to have conversations with one another, debates, discussing things.
Yes.
But also but I would add to that, I would also add a certain level of carefulness to that you learn to have principles and to defend those, but not to consider those principles dogmas or your own views as dogma.
Yeah.
Because there are certain people definitely that can teach you something. I know from we're both young, and so there are many people. We have a lot to learn, and so we should also learn to be able to listen to the people that have to teach us something.
Yeah.
The trick is to figure out which people.
Yeah, certainly. And also the listening is an art form within itself. It's very easy to get distracted and miss the points that they're making, because we're so caught up in our own storytelling and our own identification with our opinions that we miss a lot of insights. And so that's why I think the humble, let's call it just a humble approach, by not knowing. Of course, we can know some things, and we can have discussions on what we can know and what we can't know, but just having this way of approach that we lose all those things, and that speech just like a child, like, oh, what's this, what's that, what's this, like just having that open state, just wanting to learn.
Yeah.
And not be afraid of making mistakes.
Definitely, yeah, and certainly to progress in the things that you do accept finally, because at some point you do have to make a decision. What do you believe in? What do you not believe in? Certainly, in the Christian belief, we often compare it to having a relationship, and I think that's very accurate, because even if you do not believe in a personal God with whom you can have a relationship with, you can certainly have a relationship with what you would call the truth. And so it goes like this: that you might come to know a person by what other people tell you. So people might tell me things about you, what your favorite color is, what you think about this thing or another thing. So that gives me some knowledge already. It's like, all right, I can already guess what kind of person you are, but it's very superficial. And so the next step would be to have a conversation with you, to talk with you, to have something personal with you. And then if those experiences are positive, you have more of these conversations, and the trust between us gets greater. And at a certain point, you come to make a decision. Well, yes, I do trust this person, and if this person tells me something, then I believe it's from a good source. So too with what you believe in, and yeah, that can be quite tricky sometimes, but it is important. But
Okay.
What do you think about that? Do you think do you agree with me?
Yeah, I am totally with you. Yeah, for sure. But I'm just thinking about what is with this, because this is like pretty a personal way of encountering with people. But in our society, we have such big influence from media, from all types of different sources, and sometimes they cannot even link it back to these sources. So that you get influenced, and they don't know why or when they're gonna pinpoint it back. And I think a lot of those influences is from a philosophy that is called post-modernity. And I would hope to get your insight on what this, how this like ties in, because I know that a lot of people are like, post-modernity, I've never heard about this, but it is something that is very influenced into our generation. But maybe you know a little bit more about this than I do.
I wouldn't say that per se, but yeah, postmodernism has become quite the buzzing term lately. Look at people like Jordan Peterson, for example, who has talked extensively about the subject.
Yeah.
And yes, one of the characteristics of postmodern thinking is relativism. So the belief that truth is a matter of subjectivity or opinion. So I might have my own truth, and you might have your own truth, and that's fine. All conversation is not necessary because it's acceptable for two contradictory truths to exist. So yeah, that would be a short summary of what postmodernism might be in a modern age.
Yeah.
And you see that in the most fundamental of the society, where, for example, nobody would question the belief that there are two genders, for example, in the late 70s. But now, now everyone is kind of it is a very controversial subject to talk about. Well, are there two genders, or are there more than two, or aren't there genders at all?
Yeah.
So that has become quite a controversial question, and that's because relativism and postmodernity have allowed it to become a debatable subject.
So something you would consider as being important is that people have an objective truth where they can build upon, like certain principles. Is that because there's a lot of, like, with tribalism, that's something I've mentioned in the beginning. I would consider that the society is corrupt to a certain level, and I think it goes very deeply. But that is something that you probably won't agree with. But what are some things that you would consider fundamental, objective, that people in this channel is called Common Underground, because we have to find a common ground where we can stand together and where we can talk about things that are important. But I believe that it isn't possible on a mainstream level for multiple reasons. So that's why I called it like this, that we do it. You can see this in the Matrix movie as well, where the underground is symbolic for the place where Cyan is, where we can, like, talk on these matters from the view of Big Brother, aka government or whatever.
Yeah. What I find personally important for me, because postmodernism, for all the confusing things it has forced us to think about why do we believe what we believe, and can we really know for certain that things might be true? Those are existentially daunting questions that might make us afraid. For me personally, I find comfort in the fact that humility plays a big role in my life, or I try to have it a big role. I too am extraordinarily humble, but in the end of the day, if I believe in God, God loves me either way, if I'm wrong or right. I might be very wrong about certain things. I might be wrong about God. But what's most important is that I am humble towards the truth, that I allow myself to surrender to whatever might be true. For me, that's the most important thing. Because if we really are going to have the conversation of how do we know what we know, can we know for certain that anything might be true? Well, if we're going to if we're going to allow ourselves to doubt those fundamental questions, then the most important thing for me becomes surrender to whatever might be true.
But yeah. No, but do you believe that? Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Do you like to believe then? Because I make a distinction between belief and knowing. Like, knowledge comes from this word. Like, truth, I believe, can be known. It's contradicting the sentence, I guess. But something that differs from a lot of Christians. They require you to believe in God or believe in Jesus. Why? And this is something we're going to talk about some more in the second half. Is the thing that still influenced a lot of people, also a lot of conspiracy theorists, is Gnosticism. And they hold the view of that there is a conspiracy within reality itself. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But the point I want to make is that I believe that the truth can be known. Would you agree with this, or is it like is it only like certain principles that can be settled down? Okay, these are certain principles that work, and we can have a conversation on that. What would you consider?
I would say the truth can be known as far as it allows itself to be known, which sounds very, very deep. It could, but think about the person of Jesus Christ, for example. So yes, Christians do believe in God, that God the Father who created all things. But that doesn't mean that we humans already have a monopoly on everything that might be true. We do not have we cannot know God's essence. We might know certain things about him, but the true essence of who he is unknowable. But then there's a point in history where we believe that God himself makes himself known through the person of Jesus Christ, who is himself God incarnate. And by knowing him, we might know God himself. So yeah, do I agree with you? Yes and no, depending on your definition.
Yeah, I do find it very. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's the surrendering again. If I might agree with you that the truth can be known 100% fully, then it cannot be known by my own efforts. It can only be known by surrendering to the truth itself, who I call the Word, who I might call God, who I call Jesus Christ. So again, the importance of surrendering yourself, putting aside your own ego is very important.
Yeah, it's something that you said. I really agree with on a deep level with that the truth. Even though you have this, like I had some experiences where I had this grandiose energy coming over me, which I consider as the presence of God itself, and that's why I consider myself being a Gnostic. That I know that God exists because I experienced it myself. But still, these experiences only show a fraction because our minds are not, we just use 10% of our brains. Like having this experience, we cannot comprehend the fullness. Like there's still, even though for us it's grandiose, it's like whoa, yeah, this is so amazing, but it's just a small fraction of what really is there. So I do agree with you there. So yeah, let's go a little bit more deeper into the Christian views on the logos and on Gnosticism, but let's do that after the break. So people stay tuned. We'll take a short break and then we'll come back. All right, welcome back, everyone. We had a little break. In this second part, we're going to talk about Gnosticism. It's something that I find very interesting and very important as well. It has a lot of relevancy in the sense that people are still influenced by this philosophy, even though it's like from, I don't know a specific date, but it's around the start of the Christian Empire, and there's some influence that rooted back a little bit earlier, but there's still like the Cathars were, I think, and then you have the Bogomils as well. And they were pretty like a few hundred years ago, mostly extinct. But
the Cathars are from, what was it, 12th to 14th century, I believe. So yeah, still a good part in the past.
Yeah, it's something like I'm right now in south of France, so it's something that because of that I have a special interest in.
Mm.
I've visited some of the places where they were last holded out, like Minerva. It's a pretty beautiful town here in France, where they had this war against the the Vatican Church, or the Papal States, I guess it was called back then. But there, then there's the Bogomils, but there's also the Gnostics uh, in Egypt. With you probably noticed the manuscripts that were found. I forget the name.
The Nag Hammadi.
Yeah, yeah, Nag Hammadi scriptures. Uh, so yeah, there's all like different things we can get into right from there. But people are familiar, I think, with a lot of those streams. Like some people will be, I don't know, like on a mainstream level, most people won't notice, but still, certainly if you get into what we were talking about in the previous part, the first part, we talked about the conspiracy movement, and a lot of people that are into conspiracy theories, they come eventually onto Gnosticism as
Mm.
well, because there's
Yeah.
a lot of similarities in views. So, is there? I know that that is discussed in your university as well. These
Mm.
Catars and the Gnosticism. Uh, what is something that you learned there from, or did you learn through internet, or where are your where's your knowledge on
Yeah, so I
different
had a
ones?
subject about the origins of Christianity and the origins of New Testament texts, not just found in the Bible, but also outside of it. And there we basically learned about all kinds of Christians, including Gnostics. Um, and so for the people unfamiliar, the general consensus is that Christianity started as a very diverse group
Mm-hmm.
that was focused around the person of Jesus Christ, as you can imagine. And that some of these that there were many communities who had their own traditions and who had their own texts, because communication at the time, as you might know, wasn't ideal for long distance. And that's indeed some of these communities would later become what we would know as Gnostics. So yeah, that's what, and so they were constantly relevant. They in discussing and in researching
Yeah.
certain texts. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because well, what something that is very crucial that differs from Orthodox religion is that we can have a direct um, relationship with God, or a direct experience, and that is what gnosis means. That you have, the word knowledge comes from the same root. That
Mm-hmm.
we have knowledge that God exists. That's something we touched upon in the previous part.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you want to say
I,
something?
I wouldn't say that that is what sets Gnosticism apart necessarily. Of course, you would have to define what does direct connection with God mean. Because we in the Christian world are very familiar with saying that God made Himself directly known through Jesus Christ, and so by having a relationship with the person of Jesus, we have a direct connection with God. Um, what I learned is that what makes Gnostics apart is that they have a very distinct belief that sets them apart from Orthodox Christianity and from the other communities still in the diverse times. Notably, that they believe in a dualistic cosmology, so that the universe, everything that exists, wasn't created from God, but there's the good side and the bad side, or the demiurge, for example, is uh, two different entities created the spiritual world and the material world. So there's a strong dualism there.
Mm-hmm.
And also the big what you say focus on I don't know if it has a term. I forgot the term, but that we are basically that we have to be liberated from our material cases, which would be our bodies, in which you can see that dualistic view. So yeah, that's what sets Gnosticism really apart. Apart from the fact, of course, that you said it's probably older than Christianity, and so it didn't have the same origins as Orthodox Christianity.
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. I think it has a lot of influence. No, I just don't think, but the thing that I researched on it, there's a lot of different influences from different cultures, like Manichaeism, which is from the Zoroastrians, where they have the dark and light as well, where you can see the dualism there, but also where Gnosticism got its popularity when it first started during the Christian era. During the Roman times as well, was in Alexandria.
Yeah.
And so it got,
although what has to be said as well is that Gnosticism, especially in the times that we are discussing at the moment, it wasn't a self-identifying group. So you did have Gnostic communities, but only those were only called Gnostics by researchers in later periods. So you wouldn't have, for example, you would have a Christian community in, name something, Alexandria, and which would go to strangers and say, "Hey, we're the Gnostic Christian community. Be welcome." Something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Gnosticism is widespread, and as you said, it has a lot of influences from other cultures and different spiritualities, and it kind of got into a highway, you could say, when Christianity popped up, because suddenly all these Gnostic ideas got spread very quickly. But they certainly didn't call themselves Gnostic.
No, sure. But it's something that it did, like the Cathars, for example, and you cannot really directly talk about the Gnostics because, like you said, there was such diversity. But Cathars, for example, they call themselves the good Christians.
Yeah, those are a different story. That was a very distinct group, and like you said, the kafir means pure or good Christian, and yeah, they are known for, like you said, for having a very rocky relationship with the church around in the Middle Ages, and yes, they shared some beliefs with Gnosticism, certainly the dualistic aspect.
And also the scriptures that were found in Egypt, the Nag Hammadi scriptures, they were suppressed by the church as well because they had to hide the scripts in some rocks, which they did because otherwise the scriptures would have been destroyed by the most strong dominant religion at that time, and that was the Christianity.
Well, I wouldn't think we could agree on that part, but certainly there's a lot of interesting things to be found in the Nag Hammadi manuscripts, and certainly it was they were written at a time where Christianity was still a pretty it was still taking shape, and so you didn't really have the Orthodox Church. If I say, for example, the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages, that's a very powerful organization working for its own goals. But in the time of Gnosticism, you didn't really have that. You did have councils, and you certainly had mainstream Christianity, but it was still taking shape. And what's very interesting about the manuscripts in the Hammadi, is that you can very clearly see the mix between what we would call Orthodox Christianity and Gnosticism. So, for example, something to look up for your audience is the letter of, what's it called? The letter to Flora, a short-ish letter. And you can see very interestingly a mix between Christian beliefs and Gnostics. I'm making the distinction because we make the distinction now, but in those times, they would not consider it. They would just consider it Christian. They wouldn't consider it Gnostic, for example. But for example, you can see references being made to Jesus Christ as the Savior, which is pretty Christian, Orthodox. And then other times you can see references being made to the demiurge or being freed from the material world, which later would be condemned by the mainstream Christian church. So it's very interesting indeed.
Yeah, for sure. And something. Do you know anything about the perfecti? Because the organization of the Gnostics, I cannot say Gnostic in a general sense. That's a difficult thing. But something that I do know in the Cathars, they had these perfectis, and they had the I don't know the specific word for it, but they were like the believers, the general people, and the perfectis. They had this initiation on one-on-one sessions where they could initiate someone else to become a perfecti as well, and it became their structure in their society instead of like having priests of the Vatican Church. And I think that is also a reason why they had these conflicts, for multiple reasons, of course.
And that brings us back to the conversation about conspiracy theories and to modern conspiracy theories. Is that like you said, the Cathars, but also Gnosticism had a very big focus on hidden knowledge. So things that were not meant for the masses, but were individually revealed to certain persons.
Esoteric.
Yeah, exactly. And I have to say, I do see a similarity between what conspiracy theories often make the case for, and what Gnosticism and Cathars make the case for. So there's this focus on, there's you think you know this truth, but it's actually this truth. Mm-hmm. And you can see in the rituals of the Cathars, like you said, it's a one-on-one conversation where someone else becomes a perfecti. That's pretty clearly a conversation about hidden knowledge, where let me take you aside, you can become a perfecti, let me share my knowledge with you. And I cannot help to make to think about how many conspiracy theories rely on hidden knowledge or concealed knowledge, or the Church of what's called Scientology, about how they treat their members and how they go up through the ranks by having these one-on-one conversations.
Yeah. That's a very important key in Gnosticism, and also in I think in spirituality as a whole. The one-on-one is meant to be like a guide or like a teacher, but it's not like the person just depends on its words. They guide them through a certain process because they went through the same process themselves. And the thing about what you mentioned about the hidden knowledge, like that ties in together with dualism as well, because what the Gnostics believed is that what Orthodox religion prays to is the demiurge, is the god that is like a false god. So the real thing is that people have to recognize that they're praying to what, if I demystify it, it's like the external world, that you believe that God is in an external world and that you're praying to a God that's sitting on a cloud, and then you're giving away your power. But in Gnosticism, and the system that I'm acquainted with, and also that you can see this in conspiracy theories, is that no, you shouldn't give your power away to these corporations or to this external God or to the religions, but you really should reclaim your power, and you should look within. But because you don't have any structure, then there should be an initiation, like people who did a similar process and looked within themselves, and they can become like a guider and they can guide people onto this process, because it's very difficult to do this all by yourself, and this is
Yeah.
the journey that I'm on.
Yeah, and I want to ask you, what do you think is the influence on this way of thinking? This way of thinking of hidden knowledge and these rituals. What do you think is the influence on modern thinking?
Well, yeah, that comes in together with the psychology that, where there is a lot of hidden things. Wi-Fi that we're using is hidden. Quantum things that we can discuss, or abstract, all hidden stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But these the things that we do use love is something hidden. We cannot see it, but it's there. So we know intuitively that there is a lot of things that we cannot see with our five senses, or that we cannot detect with our five senses, but is there. So we have this intuitive sense that there isn't something quite right here. Like all these things that were presented towards us through society, through our friends, through whatever, there's something missing. You have this feeling there's something missing. So you're going on to
Yeah.
this search, and eventually you become acquainted with something more. And that is something that Gnosticism shares. That's something that a lot of conspiracy theories, like, okay, having this experience, like, man, there is more than five senses. Life is just is such a big mystery. But if we just accept, like, if you just accept my words right now, you will still be a believer. You will still have this access to this things that I'm talking about, because that requires experience, and that requires study, and that requires practice, and a lot of different things, discipline. But that is, so in to be more precise in your answer, like on our modern thinking, like I don't think everyone is realizing that yet, that there is hidden knowledge. But the people that do, it has a major effect on them, and that is what, like, people would call like-minded people, who know that there is a lot of things hidden from us, also by society, but also just within reality itself. So but to look within, we can discover that there is more, and that it has a major influence on us, and that is not something I have to push on to people through my words, because just live your life, and maybe this will happen to you as well. I don't have the power over that, and you would call that like God has that power to initiate people into that mystery. But it has a major effect on our modern society, and it will have a lot more. And I think this pandemic that we're currently having has a lot to do with that, with this awakening. So yeah, it's just something that is, underneath us, within us, and we have to bring it forward. And we can do this through art. We can do this through a lot of different things, but it all just depends on how engaged you are as a person on this, being engaged with the hidden knowledge. The more it gets revealed to you. It's so it's a very mystical in that sense. Does this answer your question?
Yeah, I was thinking more along the lines of, I see a similarity in the our society has become increasingly individual, has begun to give an increasing focus on individuality.
Yeah.
So it's no more the collective that really counts. It's me. The autonomy of the person is more important. And I see a sort of similarity between the rise of autonomy, individual autonomy, and the rise of popularity of Gnosticism and conspiracy theories. And I have to be honest, and I think that has to do with Gnosticism giving someone at least the promise that here's the real truth that most people don't know. It kind of I think it has a
but not just a promise though. At first it's a promise, but it doesn't stick to that. That just depends on the people's own engagement with it. If you just assume it, then it's just a promise, and then you can still just mislead people. But the whole point, I think, about Gnosticism is that you can have this direct sense. You don't have to base it upon my words. A good example of this, like Carl Gustav Jung got asked, "Do you believe in God?" And he says, "No, I don't believe. I know," and that is a Gnostic answer. Like I don't. It's not something I can put on towards another person, or of course there's a form of initiation, but that requires a lot more than just having this experience, because that experience there you have to self-initiate. But initiation just means like taking the initiative, just asking questions, and then you can be initiated into certain things that you didn't know before. And that is what you mean with hidden knowledge, that are just things that you aren't familiar with yet. But some of these things, they are not as shocking, and other things they blow your mind, and all your assumptions that you had previously might be fading away. And for some people that's really scary, because they're holding on to their ego identification and who they are as a person, so they don't want to know, it's
Yeah. And what do you think it has to do with the growing distrust people have for organizations such as, religious organizations or the government?
yeah
Do you see a connection?
Yeah, what it sets apart is that you don't have, because you don't have to believe them based on people's words. You cannot really form organizations or have teachings that you can give out on a mass level, because it's all one-on-one, or it's all like in something that you do for yourself. So that's what takes it away that you can manipulate people. Because if I said to you, you have to believe what I'm saying right now, then that becomes a manipulation, that becomes a dogma. But if I say to you, don't believe like what I'm saying, just and see for yourself if it is true, apply what I'm saying, or question, do whatever you want with it, but just approach it in your own way, then it becomes initiation, and people will experience different things from that point. But the powers that should not be, I call it always like this, they try to mislead people. They say, like the mainstream media is a pretty beautiful example for this. They give all these things about news and what is happening. But like me, for example, right now I'm traveling, and here people on the border, they say, oh, in Spain it's dangerous. And when I was in another city, like, oh man, in Toulouse it's very big. But once you're there, you get a very big different experience, because you're really putting yourself out there and really concluding if it is true or not. And that's where the media has its its power from, that it doesn't want you to figure it out for yourself. No, just believe what they're saying, just live your life from 9 to 5 and just be busy, but not really question these things deeply, and search for what is really there. And that is, I think, is what Gnosticism, at least in its modern, because I think we have to make a decision, like distinction between the historical Gnosticism, and they had their and they are very diverse. But there's also people who subtract certain teachings from, like I do, certain teachings from the Gnosticism, but I don't approach it in a dogmatic sense. Like I wouldn't consider myself as a dualist, but I think like dualism is a part of our reality. I experience at least everything dualistic. I see this as an external world, and like what is in here is internal. So for that, to a certain level, there is a certain duality. But I would say that Gnosticism tries to teach you that if you base this whole truth, there's just dualism, then you become trapped again. And that's what they call like trapped in the material world, that you see this division. But a real Gnostic, or a Gnostic, a Gnostic just sees the falseness of that. There is this duality, and like praying to an external God, for example, but knows that that there's only oneness, but it expresses through that's how we interact with it in a dualistic sense. Do you follow what I'm saying? Does it make...
Yeah. What would you think sets modern Gnosticism apart then from historic
Oh yeah,
Gnosticism?
yeah. Good that you said, Aska. Well, that of course is like some basic primary views that they get from it is like the archons, demiurge,
Mm,
all these things that are still left from the Gnostical movement, because most of it is destroyed for multiple reasons. But a lot of things we still don't have access. Like perfecti is not something that is really well known, so it's not something I would consider in the Gnostic movement, although you can still learn a lot from it. But
mhm,
I mean, the distinction is the movement got born into a time that it was in, and it was situated for that time. And there are still like some teachings within that is timeless. But if we still like discern from this, and we learn or discern, we learn from these Gnostics, then we still have our modern mentality. So it's never the
mm,
same thing. So that's why I'm saying like there's should be a distinction, because if I'm saying, yeah, I'm a Gnostic, just like the people in Qatar, there's still a lot of things that I won't agree with them about. Maybe I would change something about the system with the perfecti, or and that's, I think, why you're more skeptical towards Gnosticism, is because of dualism. I don't
mm,
see myself as a dualist. So those things I differ with, but that is because I integrated their philosophy in my authentic way, and that makes it a modern in the sense,
mm.
relevant to the times that we're in, I guess.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, I wouldn't consider myself agnostic. Um, no, my major problem with Gnosticism, especially now, and especially what's concerning me today with these conspiracy theories, it's not only the problematic view of dualism, or in your case, you might say fundamental dualism, um, but also the focus on hidden knowledge, um, because I certainly get the feeling. I get how exciting it might be to get the feeling that you receive hidden knowledge, or that you receive a certain experience of which you can be certain of. Um, but I do have to admit that goes a bit against my own beliefs that faith in itself is powerful enough to make that jump. I have to think of a song, of a church hymn, in which the Eucharist is praised. So the Eucharist in Catholic Christianity, at least, is the ritual where bread and wine are consecrated into the literal body and blood of Jesus Christ. And in a certain church hymn, we say, out of the top of my head, I don't know it completely, but we say, for something that the senses fail to see, and only faith can provide. And so it's not every time I receive the Eucharist, it's a very powerful moment, as you can imagine, because the creator of the universe is literally given to me in the form of bread. But it doesn't automatically give me a very strong, powerful spiritual moment, and I don't expect it to give me that. Just the faith alone I have in the sacraments and in the situation, what is happening, that alone is enough for me to grow in the path of truth. And what I see in Gnosticism and conspiracy theories is almost the opposite, where there's this promise, and in my view, there's only the promise. There's the promise of hidden knowledge, um, and the viewing the way things truly are, in order to manipulate people into thinking they know better than they really do. The attracting aspect of this is that if you have a world that is very complicated, and God knows it is, it is very difficult to accept that. It's very difficult for me to accept that I do not know everything. Do I know everything that goes on in my Catholic Church? No, but it takes something of me to say, and I'm okay with that. But if there's a conspiracy in front of me who says, well, this is going on with the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church is doing this and that, and people are secretly controlling this. Well, first of all, that might sound very intriguing and very alarming, and so it sounds important. And also, it gives me the feeling of knowing, at least having an idea of knowing and understanding something that I truly don't. And that I think is dangerous about Gnostic thinking, and in turn conspiracy thinking. And that goes back to the beginning of the conversation, where you asked me if I believe that there's a conspiracy at work which undermines world order. Well, I think it will be conspiracy thinking itself, where people are led to believe something that they do not understand, and that's how things start to become disordered. That's how you create social disorder. So those are my views on modern Gnosticism, as you might call it.
Yeah, like but something that you triggered was you say faith, but what is the faith based upon? Where do you need to put faith into?
Well, go back to what we discussed earlier. What faith really is a relationship.
Okay.
And you have a relationship with the person, and you know something about the person, but only what they give to you. So the only thing I know about you is what you show me or tell me. And at a certain point in the relationship, I might make the decision of trusting you. And the same goes with God. And that's where faith comes from. And of course, reason and evidence plays a big role in it. So we can philosophize about the existence of God, who God might be. We might philosophize very interestingly about the problems with dualism. And so we might come closer to the truth, which point in the direction of, in my belief, in any case, everything we can know for certain points to God himself. But there will always remain a point where we have to make that jump of faith, the leap of faith. And that's where that faith is, but that faith is based on many things, but ultimately a big surrendering to something you do not understand.
Yeah, well, something that I find interesting that you said based upon relationship at the beginning, because that is something I wanted to say. Like for me, it's more about having this relationship with God, and that doesn't go through Muhammad, that doesn't go through Jesus Christ, that doesn't go through Buddha, that doesn't go through many from the Manichaeism. No, that goes through myself. I have the connection with God within myself, and some hidden something else about like the hidden knowledge. There, like God is, I would consider the ultimate hidden knowledge that is hidden from us, but I can give this knowledge freely to everyone. But some people, God represents for me also power. I think you would disagree on this because you're seeing God as only goodness. But I see God in just having the power to create. And I can create like very beautiful things, but at the same force, God creates also a lot of destruction. And this destruction is of course necessary. but people can also twist certain teachings, and they can manipulate. And this not necessarily comes from God, but people's this, I don't know,
Their own
uh,
agendas.
yeah, because of their own agendas. And the reason why I think Gnosticism doesn't give their knowledge freely is because they want to initiate, and this is the same thing with secret societies, and why people are, getting jealous of these secret societies, because they possess certain knowledge, but they don't want to give it away freely, because the knowledge, or there's a very famous saying, knowledge is power. So if you have that knowledge and give it away to everyone else, then it becomes not as important to have that knowledge because everyone already knows it. Or you can put it into good use, and we can build something out of that knowledge. But all these things that we're discussing are based on having this relationship with God. Some people will still abuse that power, that they have this close relationship with something that is so powerful in force, and that what Gnostic called the demiurge as well, is that there is a stronger presence, and you can do a lot of great things with the stronger presence, but you can also harm people. So they were very careful in selecting people, that because it takes a lot of responsibility as well to carry these teachings, because I've met this with children. You're like a loaded gun. That's Jordan Peterson says this as well. Like if you say everything just openly, yeah, this is this is that, this is this is that, then some things they couldn't still be ready for yet. So that's why they initiated people, because they had to be at a certain point and really to digest and not use it for egoical or for their own agendas, for their own for their own desires, but they would serve the whole. That is, I don't know, I don't want to stick too much to Gnosticism in the sense that is a Gnostic view, but it's something very, very in animism. For example, I believe that everything is alive. There's within that the knowledge that things are about relationships. So you're getting in a relationship with objects, you're getting in a relationship with plants, you're getting in a relationship to other higher beings, but you still have this 2 points. You have your own point of view, but then there's the other object that you're interacting with, and not an object, but it's more like a being that you encounter with, and that can be God, but that can also be just spirits or whatever. But
yeah, I certainly sympathize with part of it, because it sounds similar to the way the apostles regarded their teachings. So you of course have Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ has had 12 apostles, and in the Catholic Church we have the tradition that the apostles were given by God a certain part of the Spirit, and that the apostles gave this Holy Spirit to other people who might act in their stead, and those are called bishops. And like you said, there's a certain responsibility to it, and you have to have a certain knowledge of what you are talking about. You have a certain faith in order to carry that responsibility. So certainly that rings a bell. I think I would make the distinction is in that what I see in Gnosticism and conspiracy theories as well is that they do not just offer faith or the promise, but also the results. And that's why I begin to have a problem, because in Christianity, the Pope might be the Pope. The Pope is elected to have a certain responsibility, but that doesn't withhold three little children in southern France to have an experience that goes beyond the Pope. I'm making a reference to the Marian appearance in Fatima. So in Christianity, we do not have this system where people will show you the truth once you're ready. No, you have your own faith, you have your own relationship with God, and God, if God wants you to experience certain things or to show you certain things, He will. So certainly, I can see the similarities.
Yeah, I would say that is like more self-initiation instead of like having this other person that guides your process, that you self-initiate, and that you have this relationship which you call God. That's the similarity, I think.
Yeah, and so, but there's also a distinction, and I think that is also important to point out that, you know, I certainly think it's funny that people distrust an organization such as the Catholic Church, thinking it's controlled by secret societies or otherwise malevolent powers, but then trust a lone person saying, just follow me and I will show you how things really are, such as in the Church of Scientology.
Yeah,
you know,
fair enough.
Sure, you can be a sheep in the Catholic Church, but you can also be a sheep in conspiracy theories. The risk is just as great, I would say. And that again, that goes back to the beginning of our conversation. I think there's a definite danger of becoming a sheep of anything, and the most important thing, at least if you want to prevent that, is having a critical mind of your own.
Yeah, I think one key that Gnostics left in their teachings is called Sophia, and I think that is a big reason why we're such good friends. Is because we both love philosophy so much, and philosophy stems from the same root. Sophia is the goddess of wisdom, and that was the redeemer of this whole arousal with being misled. I like this thing that I found. What bothers me in Catholic Church, like I do think there's some corruption in there. I do think that there's some benefit in these organizations as well, but just having the right awareness is not something that you can find within religion. It is not something you can find in the conspiracy movement, but it is something that you have to find within yourself. So
and also what you said in the beginning, the relevancy of for example, things might be true that are secret societies, but if it doesn't influence me and how I carry out my spirituality, well, then what's the point? So
well, I think that I personally believe that there are secret societies, and I would say that the secret societies, they influence you by their teachings. So maybe not you necessarily, because you're not really involved with them directly, but I would say that they also influence the Vatican Church as well, and they influence their teaching. So a lot of things that you get from your theology and from your university got influenced by these secret societies. They might bring you a lot of beautiful truths, things that are like on point, but they just put like, it's like my processor like this. You have like a bowl of truth, like water, and then you have like one droplet of poison. The whole bottle is still like, if you drink it, you still die from it. So that is something that I think like is happening in. Also, I want to do a podcast on the New Age movement, because I think that is another example of that same situation where people, I have personal experience with this, like wanting to become a spiritual person, but then you have these New Age gurus on YouTube. I won't name any names, but they do things with crystals and I don't like. I do believe in crystals, but because the computers work on crystals as well, they hold information, so they definitely work as a principle. But they would say, yeah, I have some crystals here. This is for healing your heart or whatever, or I have an amethyst. This is for love or for dreams.
But then again, the same can be said about what you believe in. You might not be part of an organization, but it can certainly be influenced by secret societies.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the predicament we find ourselves in, and what a dead end, you might say, that no matter what you believe or no matter what path you choose, you will always run the risk of being influenced by something you cannot see. And that's the point where I say, well, at that point, I cannot influence it any further, and it doesn't matter. What matters is my own personal relationship with God. Again,
okay.
the surrendering.
Yeah, the surrendering, sure. But I will also add to that there is a possibility, and that's more the individualistic side, is that you can install a certain filter, and that is what discernment is about, and that's installing your own sovereignty, that you become I and I see it in this work of Walter Russell as well. Man is God, and so God is within ourselves. So if we establish this right relationship, we have this sovereignty, then we know that we can make a discernment and we can know the truth, and we can at least become more aware of the influences from outside through meditation, through contemplation, through a lot of different practices. We become aware in such a way that maybe we won't completely eradicate it because we're still part of the social world, but at least we will minimize it, and we will become conscious and transmute it. That's what alchemy was all about, transforming it, things that influence you on a negative way, going through it with your own process, making it your own, and then bringing it out into something positive. Like if you have a trauma, for example, that might be very bad for you, but still there's something that there's a seed in that trauma that you can learn from, and that you can transform into something that will bring a lot of healing to a lot of other people that had similar experiences. But it could be art, for example, or whatever, so it's interesting stuff for sure.
Definitely.
Let's wrap it up here. Is there something you want to add to our conversations, things that you're involved in, or something in general? I would love to have you in the future on the next podcast. Not the next one, but I mean like in the future one.
The only thing I would definitely with Chert, it would be nice to speaking with him again. The only thing I would add right now is again, thanks for having me. I think we have had an interesting conversation, and I hope your viewers think so as well.
Yeah, I hope that people find some benefit for you, and I would like to thank you as well for your time and taking courage to come on here and getting you out there, and we'll speak to each other for sure. And to the viewers, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Keep in mind, I'll make some more content in the future. Don't know, next week I got another one, but it's always waiting until the uploading is up there, so just be patient with me. I'll try to improve my content better and better, so I'm still learning. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you find some meaning in it, and that's what it's all about. And peace.